this thing works anyway. Where's the remote? Okay, alright, we're in business. Okay, so the idea of institutions comes to us in two forms. So what does this remind you of? Let's see, everybody except Dylan and Jean, back to entrepreneurial class. Formal institutions, informal institutions, customs or traditions that define appropriate behavior. Yeah, a little taxi cosmos, right? Not to bring back bad memories for you, but that was the idea of institutions. Some of them are naturally formed by their own, that people just kind of have commonplace. And so the same thing goes on in international trade, especially if you have two countries that border each other. So back 100 years ago, maybe even 2,000 years ago, they were doing trade with each other, right? And there just kind of started to be customs and norms associated with doing business as they trade across the border. Over time, that's become more and more formalized as we've increased the numbers of trading countries that are involved in trade. All right, so that's the concept of institutions. Again, it's not a building, it's rules and organizations that help govern or constrain behavior. Pretty generic definition. All right, so these are the biggies that, if you guys follow any conspiracy theory type stuff, right? There's one big bank that just kind of rules the world, and President Obama is a member of this organization, and they control the money around the world or something. Well, all of those are a bunch of bogus. These institutions have kind of evolved over time. Not to say that there's not probably some politics that go on within these organizations, but I can pretty much, I would be willing to put a large sum of money that there's no funny business going on because there's enough parties involved that it just doesn't make sense. I mean, we can kind of make that prediction from our game theory stuff, that there's enough people involved in the organizations that some big conspiracy wouldn't really make sense. So we're going to start with the IMF. Go ahead and give this a read. So the International Monetary Fund is the one that played a bigger role in bailing out governments over the last 4 years or so. So they are the institution that kind of acts in some sense similar to the Federal Reserve. Everybody kicks in a little bit of money, and then if there has to be some emergency lending going on, then the IMF might step in and do that.
This is on an international level?
Yeah, this is the International Monetary Fund. So imagine that within each country, they have their own central bank. So we have the Federal Reserve, and they're doing their own thing with their currency. And then the countries are kicking in a little bit to be a member of the International Monetary Fund and to kind of help promote and stabilize the world market, especially with currency exchange. So that's its main purpose. Balance of payments, we'll get into later. We'll go into great detail later in later chapters. But that is balancing out the currency with the exports and imports. If there's an imbalance there, all of that stuff has to add up, and each central government plays a role in kind of clearing the currency through as they import and export. this last part here has been, I guess, one of the more hotly contested items. So there's this tug and pull of countries wanting to maintain their autonomy in terms of their decisions on what they do with their national policy. One of those things is their currency. So we learned in Principles of Macro that if governments want to buy weapons of mass destruction, they can run the printing press and print off money and go buy them, right? So they can pursue inflationary policies. If you end up going for a loan that's kind of an emergency loan, if you're one of the bailout countries from the financial crisis, the IMF can come in and say, hey, I'll bail you out, but you need to start doing A, B, C, and D. This is Econ 101 on being responsible with your currency. And so that's the word for that is austerity. So they kind of come down with rules. In general, the IMF doesn't have any true enforcement over these people, right? It's just there to kind of coordinate. But if you're borrowing money, the borrower is slave to the lender type of thing, which is that's a Bible quote that kind of holds true in multiple ways, secular and non-secular.
Did this kind of happen to Greece, or did they more do their borrowing from the EU?
I think Greece was involved with the IMF. I'm not sure about that. I know Germany has played a big role in bailing out places like Greece and stuff too. So I'm not sure. I think it's a mix of both. And probably when the crap first hit the fan, it was probably the IMF at that point. Okay. The World Bank. So WW2 brought the need for a lot of funds, and they thought as a public good, let's kind of get things together and help that out. That went away, and it kind of evolved into